Yeah.
It says proper names are used in order to identify and include particular entities in a conceptual method of cognition. Even proper names follow the principle of genus and differentia. For example, John Smith, with John Smith serving as the genus and John as differentia. So you have all the Smiths, but this particular Smith is differentiated as John.
Yeah, so that's family. But then what about like, what's another proper name that might be like the Sydney Opera House? That's a big building. What would be a genus? Like, does that make sense to think in it in terms of genus?
I mean,
There's no
maybe Opera
building.
House.
Maybe it's would you say kind of, but that's an instance of a building. It's not real. I don't know if genus applies to that.
It's still just a category of.
Yeah.
I mean, the differentia is Sydney Opera House. Like, it's just very particular. It's exactly this one, and beyond that, you got opera houses. And which opera house is Sydney Opera House?
Yeah.
It's just simple as that, I think, and that works well enough. Or if it says, say, New York, USA, I mean, that's state New York, country USA. I mean, it's part of it, the differential is New York, but the genus would be US.
I want to show you something, another thing that I was wanting to get your thoughts on. Like, okay, I was trying to work out a tree for method. And so I did method and then, like a tree with genus and that kind of thing. So I did method and then I went to process. Here it would be easier to. And then I went to action. I don't know if these are right, but this is just what I was trying to work out. Action. And then action is an attribute. So I just did attribute. And then attribute, I wasn't too sure. I was trying to just see where I go all the way to the top. And then attribute, I did something like, I wasn't too sure. I did entity, but I honestly don't know because I was just trying to see what happens when you get to when you keep going. And then entity becomes, I don't need to draw the rest, I think. Entity becomes like existent because entity is a kind of existent. And then existent goes to existence. So does that seem right to you?
Yeah, it looks fine to me. I have no issue with it at all.
Okay. And it seems kind of simple though. Like surely not every word just goes up a straight line like that. It's there's something about it where I was like, I can't quite figure it out, but it just felt off. Like, how is it that you just have like a straight line of words up? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how
I mean,
do
it
you
might
just?
be more obvious if you throw in other concepts in the same tree, like something at the level of method. Like, I mean, you'll see where they connect once you add another concept. Yeah, it'd be relatively straightforward like that. But I think, I mean, you could think of it a different way too. That it does get really wide. Like existence, well, that's encompasses everything. Like it'd be every single concept always goes to existence. It's a huge amount of them. I mean, I don't see what else you would
Well,
like method. What else would it be? I mean, you could maybe you could say it's also something else. Like, um, but I think just when you get to genus, there could be multiple differentia, but any differentia has the same. Any differentia is the same. The genus. There's only one genus for a differentia.
Right. Yeah. But then here, anyway, I don't know. I guess, but it's the right direction you're saying. Like I was trying to think about
Yeah.
like this. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, like I'd put identity higher, parallel with the existence, for example.
Yeah. It's funny that I can do this and yet I don't really know. I couldn't necessarily give you a definite, I can give you characteristics of methods and process, but I wouldn't be able to give you a definition. And yet I'll still know that that's what they connect to.
Yeah, I mean, if you were defining like method, you'd say it's a process where, then why are you using the word method? Like, what's unique about this instance? Like, why do you decide to use a word that's even more narrow than process?
I know because it involves some volitional aspect. It's not process isn't necessarily volitional. It could be like
Right.
a process might be stars colliding and you're describing that process. Whereas method, whenever I use it, I just notice how I'm using it. I don't know, this is one of those things. I haven't validated it for myself or anything, but how I use it and how I've seen it in use is always referring to something that humans do. Like, so it involves volition. That's one thing that distinguishes us from stars colliding, for example. So I know that that's an element, and then it's just I'd need to think more and like see if I can isolate exactly what it is, but I couldn't quite put it in words. So, but I was just curious because I was wondering if that's the process, and then you just do that with everything, and you have like this clear. I don't even know if it's a map, but it just I wasn't sure because it seemed kind of like too simple in a way. Um,
I think it won't seem as simple if you, once you add more to it. But yeah, one concept, it will look pretty simple.
yeah.
But I think if you had like 10 concepts at a similar level, you'll see how complicated it can be. Like if you just add like, well, imagine you said all the virtues like independence, pride, productivity, and you tried to reduce them down. Like, it might seem like there's a lot of branches.
Right.
There's some similarities, and at some point they'll meet. But at first it would seem complicated. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what happens when, in a way, it is like simplifying when you reduce it because you're condensing it, and it will seem simpler. I mean that's the idea. That's what the cognitive role of concepts. It might seem easy, but all the information's there. You're not getting rid of anything. Like the goal is to simplify your thinking, but it's not simplified in the sense that you can't do as much with it. It's just condensed more. You can work with it quicker and easier.
I just thought of an example where you're saying there's multiple, and I remembered, I think this is what prompted me to want to do it. So you can have furniture, and then
Yeah.
let's say chair and table. And then the thing is that you can't jump from these until you form, this was in ITOE. I don't know if this is underneath, but I'm just doing it to illustrate the point. Habitation. And so it becomes, there's like some dependency there, and it's not a simple, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if here there might be like, in order to have action, for example, I don't know how to fit in the codependencies basically, and be really clear on them. Like method obviously depends on volition, but I don't, like it seems weird to put volition here suddenly, right? Underneath it.
Yes, I would agree.
And so, yeah, I see, actually now I can see how it gets tricky, but wouldn't know. I mean, it's not that I necessarily want to do all these on paper, but I do want to get really clear on these connections mentally. So I don't know if you can't do it on paper, how would you do it mentally? Like, do you know what this, if you can't figure out how to explicitly put it on paper, then can you
Yeah,
really understand? Yeah.
I do have some resources that could deal with this. I mean, that
Okay,
was one
cool.
of the things I was looking through yesterday about some like organizing information within like indexes and whatnot. I mean, these are issues that crop up. You're
Yeah.
right, like chair, table, furniture, easy. But you want to point out that
Well,
you
there's
need the
this.
concept of habitation to
Yeah.
get the furniture. Perhaps you'll just put habitation above furniture, and then to form the concept furniture, you need habitation above it and chair and table below it, perhaps. Or maybe you just indicate a relationship somehow. That is, furniture is not a type of habitation, but it's dependent on the concept habitation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different ways you could word it to express the relationship, but ultimately, what you're doing is you can reduce it to existence or create that line up to existence. And you should be able to do that with any concept.
Yeah. I want to
And
do that.
once you create the table, like that's almost like what you're doing with definitions. Like an existent is something that's of existence that's individualized or something, or a process or a method is a process that is volitional. I mean,
Yeah.
it really simplifies the defining process if you have this in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um, let me stop this share screen. Okay. Actually, I've got more random stuff for you. Have you ever done any sentence diagramming?
No, but I'm familiar with it though.
I was wondering if it's helpful I did it ages ago and then I forgot because I was trying to learn grammar because I didn't know any grammar. And I found that I just forgot most of it anyway, but I was thinking about it if it's useful for thinking about the concepts in propositions and going, okay, this series of concepts are glued together into one unit and that kind of thing. But we can skip that. That's fine.
I mean, if you were analyzing propositions, I do think that'd be the right way to go. Like how to group things, different words together. Like how do you group up like morphemes, like say we indicate possessive in English, apostrophe s, you mean you could indicate that as a possessive thing, and you can break down the proposition that way. But I'm not sure what use it
Yeah,
would
it might
really
not
have.
be. Oh, put it
Yeah.
aside. I don't too many rabbit holes. Um, Another random question of vocabulary. Did you know when you try and learn something, the idea is you read it, you summarize because it at least shows you're able to grab what the essentials are, but you put it in your own words. Have you heard something like that when you're trying to learn? You summarize, put it in your own words. And if you summarize, it means you're essentializing. And if you're putting it in your own words, it means, well, you understand it because you've bridged the author's terms to your meanings. So are you familiar with that?
Yeah, maybe not in
What?
those explicit terms, but yeah,
Okay,
I
in this.
I like
Okay.
doing it.
But I was thinking like, all right, let's say I do that. How do I actually get to the point where how would you to improve your vocabulary? Have you gone through a conscious process to do that? Like, especially when you're writing? Because otherwise you just stay in if you're always putting it in your terms, at some point you need to jump and take other people's terms, right? Like copy other people.
Yeah, I think when summarizing, like I would probably use their unique word, whatever particular word it is, and like just describe it. Like say we're talking about Rand, like I say a conceptual common denominator is XYZ. It's characterized by these things. Conceptual common denominators are useful because like you just like using the word in a sentence. Like
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
summarizing should be harnessing the vocabulary that you don't quite understand yet, and
Yeah.
sometimes even willingness to use it incorrectly, being
Yeah.
willing to that you can accept you can make a mistake and it'll be corrected, and that way you can practice your recall and even test your understanding and fix the errors you had in it. I think that's really the only function of summarizing, that you're like practicing using somebody else's terms. But yeah, you're putting in your words. But I usually think of saying it in your words is explaining it with your understanding. But I think an effective summary would incorporate the new ideas and it be referenced explicitly.
Okay. Um, do you want another random question before we go into
Yeah.
VAR? Okay. We talk about emotions not being tools of cognition. How would you think about intuition? Because on the one hand, I understand that intuition, you wouldn't trust the intuition. Let's say you got on a plane and there's a passenger who's saying, oh, the plane, something bad is going to happen, like you wouldn't care. Like it means nothing. It's not a tool of cognition. But if the pilot who'd been flying for 30 years had a really bad feeling and he wanted to pause, you wouldn't like you wouldn't tell him, no, go. Like, what are you talking about? Your intuition is not a tool of cognition. How do I think about that? Because on the one hand, I sort of get that it's not a tool of cognition in this case, but on the other, like it almost is. It's like telling there's possibly, it's not 100%, but there's possibly really important information. And so how do I, if that is not a tool of cognition, then what is it? Like,
Well,
yeah.
to start with thinking about this, I mean, I would say that it's not a means to acquiring knowledge in terms of forming concepts or validating things, or you're not going to come to knowledge in that way. But in the other sense, you could be saying that claiming that intuition brings you the knowledge that this is not safe. I guess we could say, is it knowledge that is not safe per se? I mean, what makes it qualify as knowledge rather than, I mean, are possibilities the same as knowledge? Like if, I mean, I guess you could say you come to know that it's dangerous. I guess you'd be wanting to claim.
Well, I'll give you more detail. Let's say one of the dials is off, but he just consciously didn't notice it. It's a very small dial. It's in the far right corner, and he picked up on it subconsciously. And so that's giving him the feeling, but he has yet to discover, like he has yet to go through everything and find that dial. And so in that case, isn't that like, because knowledge, at least how I understood it, it's a grasp of perceptual or conceptual data. So in this case, his intuition has grasped perceptual data, which he has not. His intuition has, but he consciously has not. And so in that case, if it is a grasp of perceptual data, like going by the strict terms, it's like that's a tool of cognition. But there's something off there. I don't quite know. It needs more, like, to account for those kind of things which do happen. You almost need, I feel like, more detailed. I need more better way to think about that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like to think it was the third category, that I think you need to discuss the exception differently with intuition than emotion. I don't think Rand even understood well enough the role of intuition in our everyday thinking. And I do think it needs to be dealt with to give a good
Yeah.
answer. I mean, we can give these general heuristic answers like if you have the time, analyze it, but if you have to go quickly, then just use it. But at some level, it is important to recognize and use more than emotion, because it's like really telling you something factual, usually just a fallible but factual thing, which isn't any different than knowledge per se. Like you can be certain, but it could be wrong sometimes. I mean, there's
I would,
something different about intuition than emotion.
yeah, although the difficulty is there's no way on its own, there's no way to validate it. Like, for example, one example of and I would say there's definitely a very close connection, right? Because if you think about, like, you hear a noise outside and you think someone is breaking in, but it just turns out it's a twig or something like that. Well, that's an example of, like, unless you go out, you can't validate it. Like it isn't a source of knowledge, right? But the difference there is that it's not like every day you listen to noises in your backyard and go, that's the sound of a twig, and you become the expert in the noises of your backyard. Whereas a pilot who's flown for 20 years and is very comfortable in that environment and constantly his subconscious is picking up on stuff way differently than just someone who's got no knowledge of the field. And so it's tricky because you can't validate it like on its own just because he has a bad feeling. But there's something there about it's picking up on information that he consciously hasn't picked up on yet. And so I don't know how to think about that, to be honest, but I thought maybe you might.
Yeah, I mean, emotion doesn't pick up on the things that intuition does. So I don't think we can give the same answer about emotions. Yeah, emotions are not tools of cognition. They only tell you a particular value judgment, but it doesn't tell you the facts of the world. But intuition can, and that's the difference. And I think it deserves a different analysis. I mean, clearly you're right. You can't validate in the same way as something you consciously worked out and are using in a very deliberate manner. It's different than that. So you can't really validate intuition like you can thoughts, because you can't like pause it, go backwards, or follow a new conclusion or new intuition. They kind of just pop up.
Yeah, what I'm saying though before with the emotion is that they are very similar or almost the same, because that example I gave you of like you're lying down and you hear a noise in your backyard and you think someone's breaking in. Like you could say the intuition is someone is breaking in, or I have a bad feeling because of it. Just like the pilot, his intuition just gives him a bad feeling about flying, but he hasn't yet pinpointed, he's making decisions on that. He's done it for 20 years versus someone in bed who just has a reaction to something outside in the backyard. Like we know our emotions do that. So I brought that up as an example because I feel like there's still something about it being more of an emotion than like intuition is very close to emotion, right? It's basically the same thing, but I'd say that it's more of, I would say it's more towards intuition where it's based on a lot of experience in something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it is more towards emotion than it is anything else, but I think you're right. It just, the main thing I'm pointing out is that it requires a different analysis than emotion per
Right.
se,
Right.
which I think you're right to question. And I can't say anything within objective literature that really deals with what makes intuition different,
Yeah.
which I think would be valuable to exist out there, or a valuable thing. Maybe I should write that, because
Yeah, maybe
I
you
do think it's
should.
a very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there are also some fields where people make their decisions on the basis of intuition due to a time urgency. Um,
For sure.
that's why soldiers train so much, right? Because they don't function. They're training themselves not to function on a conscious level. Um, but anyway, that's a side issue.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
that's right.
should we go to? Let's just go to whatever's left in Opile for the rest of the session. Yeah,
Sure.
cool.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. So let's see what we got. Just scroll ahead to the questions and then we can read through. Okay, so remember I was the friend with negative energy and frequencies, but is a very successful businessman, or the doctor who believes in demons, but holds a successful career. So how do I reconcile this quote with those two people? So let's see. Okay, so if one attempts to combine reason and emotionalism, the principle of reason cannot be his guide, the element that defines the terms of compromise, because reason does not permit subjective feeling. Defines it because reason does not permit subjective feeling to have any voice in cognitive issues. The ruling principle of the epistemological middle of the road is I will consult fact and obey the rules of evidence, sometimes when I feel like it. In regard to such a mentality, the skeptic claims are true. The emotionalist is cognitively impotent and cannot fully trust even his better ideas. There's no way to know which conclusions are better or worse because he has jettisoned the human means of knowledge. To deny the absolutism of reason is not a harmless indulgence like having chocolates on a diet. It's more like taking arsenic 3 times a day as the essence of one's nutrition. Yeah, I think this again, because I don't know many people who believe in the absolutism of reason. There's not many.
Yeah.
And yet they're alive, they're functioning, they're running businesses, they're they're doctors. And so I'm like, what's going on here? Like what am I not getting? What
Um. Yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to say you're right here. I don't see much value in the passage other than she's just describing a very particular
this is
kind
Opa,
of
by the way.
person.
Peacock.
Oh, Peacock. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Peacock does that a bit too strong. Like, I mean, like, I get it. He's abandoning reason is bad and it's harmful, and you need to be consistent if you want to flourish and things like that. But I mean, it seems odd to then go all in and say that you cannot fully trust even his better ideas. Like on some level, yeah, he's denying that he should trust his better ideas, but maybe he just acts in contradiction to that. He can literally just ignore that inconvenience and just say, I can trust my reason with everything except this one area. Like people are able to do that. And I guess, I mean, it's not really addressing that so much. He's not really addressing what happens if you compartmentalize.
Well,
Yeah,
he actually says in a later passage it's not possible to do that. And I also didn't understand that. So it
I
goes back to
disagree.
the
It's not
unity in
possible.
epistemology and ethics. Remember, he talks about all knowledge interrelated. One evasion or one, if you follow it logically, causes you to become unconscious, something like that. So, I mean, it's interesting. I just don't, I'm like, this, how do you, I don't even know how you make those conclusions. So,
I mean, I would just best I would say is it fundamentally weakens anything the person believes. They have that much less reason to believe what they believe. And what I agree with you, I mean, I do think it's possible to compartmentalize. You can't shut yourself off completely. I think, I mean, that's what I mean by weaken your beliefs. On some level, you are destabilizing what you yourself believe and giving yourself reason not to believe what you believe and giving yourself reason to not really know anything. You give yourself license when you don't know to just not bother thinking more. I would almost think it's more of an issue of moving forward, coming to new ideas. If everything is as it is and stays that way forever, it might not make a difference, but well, that's not flourishing. Like static life, static existence is not going anywhere. Like you want to actively be acquiring knowledge, being productive, being rational. So the best you can do, I think, is just stagnate your intellectual development. You could just be stuck where you are. Or if you do keep going forward, at some point you'll have to acknowledge that you either given into non-reason or you just double down on your ignorance of evidence or double down on the fact that you're ignoring evidence.
what did you mean by it weakens, fundamentally weakens? You said something like, I can see how it fundamentally weakens. Can you explain that? I didn't quite,
Well,
and like, why do you think that? What did you mean and why do you think it?
well, to begin with, of course, the one irrational belief. I mean, you can't validate it. Reason can't validate it, and you can't use reason to understand it. It's just impervious to reason. It's just immune, and you're willing to accept that. You're willing to accept that you hold a belief that is not based on reason. Whether or not they call it, say it that way or not, I mean, we recognize that they are because they're ignoring evidence. And if your other beliefs are grounded on reason and evidence, if you actually honestly try to ground it all on reason and evidence, you're saying like sometimes I can ignore reason and evidence. Implicitly, you'd be saying that. And if you could ignore sometimes, then you can almost say sometimes my knowledge can never be validated. Sometimes it's always uncertain. Sometimes there's nothing I can do. And
As determined by how I feel and what I want to follow. But then that goes back to Peacock's thing. But I don't see that happening. Like, I don't see that happening in reality.
mm, maybe destabilize is not the best way to think of it. I mean, it's too much of an analogy I think I'm using. But
Yeah,
I
sorry,
think the issue is um, that when you grant non-reason sometimes, that you grant the power to the validity of non-reason or something like that. You're just granting something in your beliefs, at least implicitly, that you don't need to validate. You don't need to think about it. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. And I'm saying that if you change nothing about your beliefs for the rest of your life, you probably would get by fine. You just keep everything as is. You're functioning fine. Just keep doing the same thing. You'll be okay. I mean, I guess you could do that, but I think you'd be fine. And I think that's a lot what people do. They take what they have and they just go through the rest of their life with that. But if we want to think of morality, or at least in terms of our flourishing and our development and the purpose of reason, which serves our life and serves our flourishing and happiness, we would want some type of growth or gathering of knowledge, that there's always something to understand. As long as you're living in the world, you have to come to understand things. So as you're gathering new evidence, new knowledge, new everything, or even just as the environment changes, like where you live might change. Like thinking if you're a hunter, even like you might say it's gotten dry and there's a drought or something. Like you need to be able to adapt as you go, think as you go. And if you've abandoned or started to abandon your principles, it can take over more and more.
What principles? Like you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you would, where you decide to abandon reason, where that one area is, it can start to become a method of thinking, not just a thing you use for one particular idea. I mean, either you throw out the idea or you start abandoning other ideas. Like, what I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to develop your knowledge, I guess you need to be careful that those prior ideas don't jump in, that you don't start using those ideas of you don't need evidence for some beliefs. I'm not sure if that's helping.
I'm still stuck on it, but I think this might be key. How would you differentiate, how did he use the term? Emotionalism, like maybe faith versus reasoning. Maybe that's what we reduce it to. How do you differentiate that? Because I was wondering, like, with that example that I gave up. So with the guy who believes in energies and frequencies or whatever, like maybe it is based on reasoning. Maybe he's just like, yeah, like sometimes I get a bad feeling and it turns out that the person is bad. And therefore there is energies and frequencies. And like, maybe that's his reasoning process. So that wouldn't really be faith, would it? Like, it's possible that is reason.
Yeah, in his case, I mean, bad reason, but reason nonetheless.
Yeah, okay. So you can have really bad, especially, well, he's a smart guy. So you can, I think the more intelligent you are and the more absurd the belief, I don't know. This is confusing because you can rationalize too, right? Rationalize is to cover up, is to put a plausible reason in place of a actual doubt. Because I'm just trying to work out, like, okay, what would be, how do you know something is faith and how would you know it's reasoning? To me, I think maybe faith includes there's doubt in the reason. So meaning you have somehow picked up on evidence that counters that, but you're ignoring it. Would you say is that one characteristic of faith?
At least in the way Peacock uses it, yes.
Well, what do you think then? Like, how would you differentiate reasoning and faith? Just to help get our heads around
I agree with Peacock there. I think a Christian might disagree. That's more what I meant, but I agree. I think he's right.
Well, what would a Christian say?
They probably want to claim that they aren't ignoring evidence, that just their evidence is unique in some way, or they might say revelation is evidence. And I wouldn't consider revelation evidence. And that's part of the problem. Like,
but revelation to them is feeling and emotion. So they're saying our emotion is the evidence, which is faith, right?
In a way, yes. And
yeah,
it reduces that, at least on our terms. when we
Yeah.
analyze what they're saying, they're talking about usually revelation or somebody bore witness to God and we have to trust their testimony or things like that. That's usually what they get into. Like you may have not witnessed yourself, but you can trust their testimony and their the testimony of somebody with revelation. So it still boils down to like um, something besides reason, something besides evidence.
Right. And beside feeling in this case.
Mhm. I think one way to think of what Peikoff is doing here is that I think Rand's idea is that your psychoepistemology, as in the psychology of the way you deal with knowledge in the world around you, just whatever you do
It's such a
psychologically.
mouthful. I still don't have my head around.
Let's just
All I
say,
know is that just means subconscious to me, basically.
yeah, your methods of reasoning that you use affect everything you think about. I mean, it's the method with you deal with reality. It's the method of your thinking
But
as you an individual. Just what each individual maybe thinks a little differently, and they have different principles, and some of these even violate principles of reason. But whatever it is, whatever your methods are that you use, are
well,
everyday thinking.
but honestly, that's still like I'm trying to get my head around that because it's interesting. But it's like, what could you think of an example of a method, like two methods, one that's different from another, but not extremes? Like, how does that, like one method would be, I just go with my gut and don't analyze what's in my gut, and another one would be I consciously think everything through, but I can't get more like high resolution detail than that, like as far as psychoepistemology goes. Actually, you remember Nassim Taleb's story of Fat Tony and the other guy? There's this geek guy he always makes fun of, who like he calls him the idiot academic. Do you know
Yeah, I
what I'm
remember
talking about?
that.
Where the
Yeah,
guy's like, you roll a dice and it's 599 times, and the guy he calls the idiot academic thinks it's still 1 in 6 chance, whereas Fat Tony with a cigarette is like it'll be a 5 again. Would you say that's psychoepistemology?
I would. I mean,
Okay.
they'll disagree about objectivist epistemology, but it's expressing their way of thinking,
Mm.
their psychology, their way of thinking. I mean, I can imagine Fat Tony's like he's probably like, I imagine him as a big guy with strong attitude, very stubborn, pretty good at ordering people around, says things with certainty, but never somebody you could have a deep conversation with because he's really living life in the seat of his pants. I mean, that's kind of how I imagine that he could be right sometimes, but his way of dealing with life isn't about like reason. It's about like our quick intuitions. That's his life. That's his thinking.
Yeah, I saw that differently with Fat Tony, but we could review that another time. It takes us on too much of a tangent. I guess I'm just trying to work out like, we're talking about methods of thinking. And like, what are
Yes.
these? Like, I only know it in extremes. Like, well, there's only one method of thinking that I can think of, which is using reason. Like, when I think psychoepistemology, to me, it's a blank. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have people think in different ways, but like, what is that? What are the different ways that I'm stuck on that? And how does that relate to like, I guess we brought that up because of how do you differentiate someone who's just reaching some strange conclusion through faith versus uh, mistaken reasoning. I'm actually more confused. So psychoepistemology, but I've got more questions, so it's good.
Do you
Psycho,
remember that list we do with the mind body dichotomy?
yes,
I mean, I could think of like,
that's a psychoepistemology.
yeah, you take three of them to three of the rows together, and you could say that's one way of thinking. Like somebody who's more idealist, like who's an idealist about morality, who's but an empiricist about concepts and focuses on the body a lot. I mean, that creates a certain way of thinking.
Yeah, I'd
And you could
need
have different degrees and all that.
right. I marked that up because I wanted to get characters in fiction who represent different aspects. So I could then figure it out better because I still don't. I mean, I get the overall tree diagram, but I don't doing it. I was preparing to post on that, but I haven't gotten around to it. Okay.
You can almost just think of it like 3 dials. Like each character you pull it, one character you pull way to the left an idealism, way to the right an empiricism,
Yeah.
and keep mind and body in
That
the middle.
that's still pretty abstract. Like I'd need to see.
Yeah.
I need to see it actually in practice for me to go, okay.
I guess that example works for me because I just imagine that in the context of video games. If you're making a character, you have the dials and you could change some traits.
Okay. Got it. What else was I going to ask you here? Is if he talks about who would you rather be your clerk at the store. In Australia we say, I think, clerk. You guys say clerk, right? Clerk.
Yes.
Clerk. Yeah.
Clerk. What's that bird I hear out there?
I don't know. We just have lots of birds. I'm pretty high up. I'm on like 14th story, so it's just some bird outside.
That's a truck.
No, there's also a bird. You can hear a bird.
Oh.
You hear those birds in the morning. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I've never heard a bird like that before.
Yeah. Well, we have black swans here. It's a completely different continent.
Yes.
So what was I thinking about? Remember he talks about who would you rather be your shopping clerk? The guy who believes in demons, or someone who just miscounts the shelves? And in that case, you're like, okay, well, he puts that in the context of the arbitrary. He says someone who believes in the arbitrary. Is that what faith is? Is faith belief in the arbitrary? Is that the same thing?
I think, yeah. I don't know if they desire. I don't think they want it to be arbitrary. They think it's genuine, but I think when we break it down, it's if you're not using evidence to what's before you, it's not anything but arbitrary.
Got it. Okay. Because then in that case, the only difference between the person who believes in the demons in the store, at least we're going according to this, right? At least my understanding of this so far, because I could be wrong here. My understanding of the difference between someone who believes in demons in a store and someone who believes in God, there would be no difference. They'd be just as dangerous to deal with. Because it's like, you'd almost say that's not true. Because if someone, I don't know, because God is more acceptable in a way. It's like, could someone mistakenly believe in it? I don't know. This is confusing, to be honest. But
that's a weird example because, like, I wouldn't care personally, like, who it was, if that's all that was. Like, where's the context of that quote?
Well, that was in OPA in the arbitrary section. Who would you rather? If you look up demons, you'll probably find it. But like, you wouldn't care. So if someone was your doctor, and the doctor had like all these voodoo dolls on his desk and believed in demons.
Yeah, a doctor I would care though.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Or would you go to one who, because according to this, at least my understanding, they're both arbitrary. So, but then you'd feel more comfortable going to a doctor who believed in God, right? Then you'd rather go to the doctor who believed in God than the one who believed in demons and had voodoo dolls on his desk.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
I would.
But then they're both arbitrary.
Would I? I'm not sure about that actually, but I mean, those I'm not sure, but if I could choose between, well, that's difficult to say because I know one of my doctors is an Orthodox Jew, and I don't think anything of it as far as his treatment. And I mean, I guess I could say I'd rather not have somebody that has arbitrary beliefs, but sometimes they're not very consequential as far as I know their thinking goes.
Yeah, I found the quote.
I mean, if you go all out.
Right, yeah, look, this one.
Who you prefer to work for? I mean, to work for, yeah, not the second guy.
But the key, I think the key for both of this, whether it's work for, deal with, is that there's a relationship between you and the person. So it doesn't matter work for, doctor,
Yeah.
all these things apply.
Yeah, I mean, work is one thing, groceries is another. Buying groceries, I wouldn't care. Working for, I'd care to only talk to the guy who miscounts something, and talk to, yeah, the first guy, the guy who miscounts. I only have interest in talking to the demon dude if I'm just curious about what he thinks. But for the most part, I don't care. I don't want to talk to him.
But then this goes back to what we were saying before, is that this guy represents the arbitrary, but then according to this definition, so does the believer in God. And yet, when I think about it, I would prefer to deal with the man who believes in God. And yet, is that, if they both represent the same thing, is that not wrong? There's something missing. I don't know. There's this whole thing. There's like stuff in here that I'm not clear about, basically.
The way I understood the quote is that Peikoff is asking you to think about how the particular one applies to the context. To me, I just read it as, which maybe he didn't intend this, but I read it like whether or not you deal with someone who thinks about the arbitrary depends on what your objective is. If you just want to do a shop for your groceries really quick, give them some money and be on your way, I don't know if it would matter if you dealt with someone who believes in the arbitrary. Right. If they can function in society, that's all that matters. But if a different context of you decide to go to a job interview and in the office he tells you all about his belief in demons and how demons are affect every day and that he has to follow the rules because the demons are going to kill you or kidnap you if you don't follow the rules. Like that would be a whole different thing. Like no thanks, I don't want to work there. I don't know what kind of insanity might go down. I don't know what other kind of arbitrary things might be involved with the rules. Like if I break the rules, what might he do? Or how do I even deal with changing rules or something like that? Or unfair rules or something like that. Like you couldn't, I don't think I could deal with him. I'd be skeptical that he could be reasoned with.
Yeah. Something to discuss more of, I think.
Yeah, and